It is one of the great paradoxes of Christianity that the eternal God has chosen to lodge his treasure in the most unlikely containers. Imagine for a moment a king storing diamonds not in vaults of steel, but in jars of clay, brittle, cracked, and easily shattered. The world would call it folly, but God calls it wisdom. For he has not hidden his light in the splendor of marble palaces or the majesty of mountains, but in us frail, stumbling creatures of dust and breath. It is as though the divine delights to remind us that the strength of the gospel does not arise from the vessel but from the treasure itself. Our weakness, rather than diminishing his glory, becomes the very frame that displays it. If this truth takes hold of the heart, it changes everything. Suffering, failure, even death become doorways through which glory shines. When I consider the Apostle Paul's words that we have this treasure in earthen vessels, I am struck by the sheer strangeness of the choice. Clay pots were common, inexpensive, and easily broken. They were the humblest of household items, not the kind one would guard with vigilance. And yet Paul tells us that God has placed within such fragile vessels the surpassing power of his own life. This suggests something vital, that the Christian life is not an exhibition of human strength, but of divine grace. We are not the showcase of our own excellence, but the stage upon which the excellence of God is revealed. The cracks in our clay jar are not to be despised, for it is often through them that the light leaks out. Think of a lantern with broken seams. The darkness is most visibly pierced at the points of fracture. So too, the presence of Christ shines most brilliantly through the weaknesses of his people. But here lies the difficulty. We resist this design. Our natural inclination is to patch and polish the vessel, to present ourselves as unbroken, unflawed, self-sufficient. Yet the gospel begins with the admission that we are not whole. The very act of repentance is a confession that the vessel is chipped and fractured, and grace is not given to the strong, but to the contrite of heart. The paradox, then, is this: only those who embrace their fragility can truly carry the treasure. Consider the incarnation itself. Did not God, in Christ, take on earthen vessel form? The Creator entered creation, not clothed in splendor but swaddled in weakness. He chose a manger rather than a throne, carpenter's tools rather than a scepter, a cross rather than a crown of gold. If the eternal Son was willing to wear clay, how can we, his followers, despise the humility of our own frailty? There is also something profoundly comforting here for the weary. The knowledge that the vessel is earthen relieves us from the crushing burden of perfectionism. For if the vessel were expected to be strong enough, pure enough, glorious enough in itself, then the treasure would never be secure. But the treasure is Christ, and his glory does not depend upon the durability of the clay. Indeed, the weaker the vessel, the more evident the surpassing greatness of the power. This recognition reshapes our understanding of suffering. We often ask, why must we endure trials? Why must the vessel be chipped and bruised? And yet it may be that in the very breaking, the radiance of the treasure becomes visible. A sealed jar hides its contents. A cracked one reveals them. God may allow the jar to be struck not out of cruelty, but out of mercy, that the world may glimpse what lies within. We may also think of love in this light. To love another is always to risk fracture, for to open one's heart is to expose its brittleness. Yet it is precisely in this risk that divine love makes itself manifest. Our friendships, our marriages, our acts of kindness, all are clay jars, fragile and easily wounded. Yet the treasure they bear is eternal, for love is the very life of God. And when human love falters, the treasure remains, outlasting the vessel that carried it. Hope, too, finds its meaning here, for the day will come when the fragile container is laid aside. The body, which now aches and bends beneath the weight of mortality, will return to the dust from which it came. But the treasure is imperishable. The soul, bearing the seal of Christ, is destined for glory beyond decay. What is fragile will fall away. What is eternal will shine forth. The breaking of the vessel is not the end of the treasure, but its unveiling. In this way, even death itself is transformed. What appears to the world as final loss becomes, for the Christian, the great disclosure. The treasure long hidden within clay is at last brought into full radiance, unmarred by the vessel's weakness. Death does not rob us of glory, it removes the wrapping. And so we are called not to despise our fragility, but to consecrate it, to offer even our cracks to God, trusting that through them His light may reach others. The earthen vessel was never meant to be admired in itself, but to point beyond itself. When others see the endurance of faith in suffering, the gentleness of love in frailty, the radiance of hope in the face of death, they behold not the pot, but the treasure it contains. Here, then, lies the secret of Christian joy. It is not found in denying our weakness, nor in glorifying and embodying it, but in surrendering it to the one whose power is perfected in weakness. To be fragile, yet entrusted with eternity, that is the dignity bestowed upon us. The angels themselves must marvel that such clay could carry such fire. We live in an age that recoils from weakness. From childhood we are urged to project strength, to polish the exterior, to harden the shell. The world admires the vessel that gleams, even if it is hollow within. But the gospel offers a different valuation. It tells us that God is pleased to dwell, not in the jars that sparkle with worldly admiration, but in the ones honest enough to admit their fragility. This is why humility stands at the doorway of the kingdom. Pride seeks to make the vessel the treasure. Humility confesses that the treasure is not our own. It is the difference between a window that boasts of its glass and one that simply allows the sun to pass through. The first draws attention to itself. The second vanishes in the brilliance it conveys. And so, humility is not self-contempt, but self-forgetfulness, the recognition that what matters most is not the container, but what shines through it. Think also of how this truth reshapes our understanding of ministry. When Paul preached, he did not trust in eloquence or in human wisdom, lest the cross be emptied of its power. He knew that if men were converted by admiration for the vessel, their faith would be fragile indeed. But if they saw through his very weakness the reality of Christ, then their faith would rest secure upon the treasure itself. So it is with us. The most effective witness is not the flawless Christian, but the forgiven one, not the strong saint, but the one who leans heavily upon Christ. There is a certain relief in this, for many of us live with the gnawing fear that we are too broken, too inconsistent, too weak to be of use in God's hands. But it is precisely such jars of clay that He delights to fill. The more we feel our insufficiency, the more space there is for His sufficiency to be displayed. Our inadequacy does not disqualify us from service. It is the very stage upon which grace performs its wonders. And let us not forget beauty. Even a cracked vessel can be lovely when the light within it glows. In fact, sometimes it is lovelier because of the cracks, for the fissures become windows through which radiance streams. So with human souls, the scars of suffering, the lines of age, the marks of endurance, all these can serve as apertures for glory. To the eyes of heaven, the most ravaged saint may shine with greater splendor than the unbroken figure of worldly power. This, I think, is part of the weight of glory of which I once wrote. The treasure within us is not merely a private consolation, it is destined for display. God intends to reveal His glory in us, and not despite our fragility, but through it. The earthen jar, once emptied of itself, becomes the chosen vessel of eternal light. Here is the call, then, not to despise your weakness, nor to idolize it, but to yield it. Offer the broken vessel into the hands of the potter. He who first shaped you from dust knows how to mend, how to fill, how to pour out His treasure through you. The cracks will remain, perhaps, but they will no longer be signs of shame. They will be the very channels of grace. And in that day, when we stand before Him, the vessel will finally give way, and the treasure will shine without hindrance. The clay will crumble, but the glory will remain. The shadow will flee, but the light will endure. And we shall know at last that what seemed fragile and fleeting was, in truth, the chosen means by which God displayed his eternal strength. If the treasure is Christ himself, and the vessel is our frail humanity, then the Christian life may be thought of as a continual unveiling. Each season strips away a little more of the clay, until at last the glory is revealed in its fullness. Suffering, which so often feels like senseless loss, is in truth a chisel in the hand of the divine sculptor. Each blow may jar us, each fracture may grieve us, but through them the rough stone is cut away, leaving behind the shape of Christ in the soul. This is why the saints of old could rejoice even in affliction. They were not masochists delighting in pain, but pilgrims who recognized its fruit. They knew that the cracks in the vessel were not signs of God's absence, but of his refining presence. Indeed, the most radiant testimonies are rarely born of ease. They emerge from the furnace. For gold is proved by fire, and faith by trial. Think also of memory. Each scar upon our clay tells a story, and those stories, sanctified by grace, become treasures in themselves. A season of grief that once seemed unbearable may, in time, become the very chapter through which we comfort another. The vessel may be chipped, but in the hands of God, even the broken pieces are arranged into a mosaic that reflects his light. Nothing is wasted, not even the fragments. There is, too, a warning in this truth. For if we harden our clay with pride, refusing the potter's touch, the vessel becomes brittle indeed. What he intends as a channel of grace can, through stubbornness, become a vessel of self. And when such jars break, as all must in time, they reveal not treasure but emptiness. Better then to yield daily to his hand, allowing him to fill and to shape as he wills. Now let us lift our eyes to the horizon of hope, for the image of the jar is not the end of the story. Scripture promises a day when what is perishable will be clothed with the imperishable, when the fragile vessel will be exchanged for one of glory. Paul speaks of it as a building from God, eternal in the heavens. What now is clay will then be crystal, transparent and indestructible, made fit at last for the treasure it contains. Until that day, we walk as pilgrims carrying a hidden wealth. To the world we may seem unimpressive, cracked, even foolish. Yet heaven knows that within these jars resides a treasure surpassing all the riches of earth. And when the final unveiling comes, it will be seen that the greatest glory was not in the vessel's strength, but in its surrender. Therefore let us bear our weakness without despair, our scars without shame, and our mortality without fear. For the true measure of the vessel is not in the clay, but in the Christ who dwells within, and he is sufficient. The picture of treasure in earthen vessels has another lesson. It teaches us how to see others. We are quick to judge by the clay, to be dazzled by the polished exterior, or to dismiss the vessel that seems cracked beyond use. But if God's glory is hidden in fragility, then no person, however humble or broken, is beyond bearing that treasure. The beggar on the street, the elderly woman in obscurity, the child whose name the world will never know, each may be a bearer of the divine. To see only the vessel is to miss the mystery. To discern the treasure is to glimpse eternity. This should reshape our fellowship. We are not gathered as a display of perfect containers neatly aligned upon a shelf. We are a community of chipped and weathered jars, each entrusted with the same surpassing gift. What binds us is not the beauty of the vessel, but the unity of the treasure. And when we gather in worship, it is as though many small lamps, each with its cracks and seams, are placed together until the room glows with a great light. Think, too, of evangelism. To share the gospel is not to parade ourselves, but to point to the treasure. If people see only the jar, they may admire or they may scoff, but either way, the treasure remains hidden. Our task is to speak and live in such a way that the vessel is transparent so that Christ may be seen through us. This is why weakness need not disqualify. Often it is the very thing that convinces others that the power is real. A cracked pot cannot boast of holding water by its own strength. When it carries life-giving water still, one must ask where the strength comes from. And what of joy? True Christian joy is not the denial of cracks, but the assurance of treasure. It is not a forced cheerfulness pasted over sorrow, but the quiet confidence that even in the breaking, nothing of ultimate worth is lost. This joy is not fragile because it does not depend on the vessel. It rests in the treasure which is Christ eternal. One day when all vessels have been broken and remade, the treasure will shine unhindered. The glory of God will no longer be glimpsed through cracks, but will fill all in all. Until then, every weakness born in faith, every fracture yielded to his hand, every act of love poured from a fragile heart becomes a testimony that the treasure is real. So let us carry our jars with reverence, not because the clay is strong, but because of what lies within. Let us endure the cracks without despair, for they are the openings through which eternity is revealed. And let us look with awe upon one another, seeing not merely the earthen frame, but the treasure it bears. For Christ in us is the hope of glory, and that hope will not put us to shame. There is, I think, a profound secret hidden in this image of treasure in clay. It is not only about weakness and strength, but also about belonging. For a vessel, after all, exists not for its own sake, but to hold and to pour. A pot that never bears water is a contradiction of its purpose. Likewise, we were never fashioned to be empty, self-contained beings. The very fragility of our frame testifies that we were meant to be filled, and not with trinkets of this world, but with the immortal life of God. How tragic, then, that so many spend their days polishing the clay, adorning it with paint and gilding, yet never receive the treasure for which it was designed. Such lives may appear beautiful to the passing eye, but when the vessel breaks, and all vessels must, the emptiness within is revealed. By contrast, the humblest jar, filled with the life of Christ, possesses a wealth that no time or trial can diminish. And what a staggering trust this is, that the Eternal would choose to dwell in such dust-bound creatures. It is as if a king were to place the crown jewels in a child's toy box, not out of carelessness but out of love. God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the strong, the lowly to confound the mighty, so that no flesh may boast before him. The treasure is his, the vessel ours, and the glory belongs to him alone. When once we grasp this, it changes even the way we view death. For death, which seems the final breaking of the vessel, is in truth the unveiling of the treasure. The clay falls away, but the glory remains. What was long hidden in weakness bursts forth in splendor. The Christian does not cling desperately to the earthen jar as though it were the ultimate possession. He looks beyond, knowing that the treasure within is eternal, and that even now it is being prepared for full radiance. Here, then, lies our consolation, our calling, and our hope. To accept our fragility with humility, to bear our cracks with patience, to let the light shine through us in love, joy, and endurance, to see in every other soul not merely clay, but the possibility of treasure, and to await the day when the potter himself will break the vessel at last, only to reveal the treasure in its unshadowed glory. Until then, let us walk gently, carry reverently, and live faithfully, knowing that the surpassing power is not of us, but of God. And now, dear friends, if these reflections have stirred your heart, I invite you to journey with us further. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, that this light may reach more vessels across the world. For each jar, however fragile, may yet bear the treasure of Christ. The truth of treasure in earthen vessels is not meant merely for lofty meditation. It is meant for daily living. For what does it mean to rise each morning as one who carries such a treasure? It means that even the smallest task is consecrated. Washing dishes, tending children, speaking kindly to a neighbor, these are not trivial acts when performed by one who holds the light of Christ. The jar may be common, but the contents sanctify the ordinary. It also means that failure need not be final. The jar may fall, may crack, may spill, yet the potter does not discard it. Instead, he gathers the fragments and, with a mercy beyond our imagining, fills it anew. Many of us fear that our mistakes have rendered us useless, but if the treasure is his, then he can pour it even through brokenness. Indeed, sometimes it is only the broken vessel that learns how to truly pour. And what of community? Imagine a room of clay jars, each with its fractures. Alone, the cracks seem shameful. But together, when the treasure glows, the light streams through 1,000 seams, filling the whole chamber with radiance. This is the church, not a collection of flawless vessels, but a fellowship of fragile ones, whose shared weakness becomes the very means by which Christ illumines the world. We might also say that the doctrine of earthen vessels protects us from despair. For if all depended upon the vessel's strength, who could stand? But since the treasure is Christ, our security rests not in our ability to hold fast, but in his ability to fill. The pot may tremble, but the treasure is sure. The clay may weaken, but the life within endures. Thus we are invited to walk with a quiet confidence, neither boastful nor crushed, but steady in the knowledge that his grace is sufficient. Finally, the image directs our longing heavenward. For though we honor the treasure now, we still see it dimly through cracks and shadows. A day is coming when the vessel will be transformed, when mortality will put on immortality, when what is sown in weakness will be raised in power. Then the clay will be no more, and we shall shine as vessels of incorruptible light, fashioned perfectly for the glory we were meant to bear. This, dear friends, is the hope that steadies the pilgrim heart, that in our fragility we are not forsaken, in our weakness we are not wasted, and in our mortality we are not lost. The potter has placed his treasure within us, and he will not abandon the work of his hands. So let us walk humbly, shine faithfully, and wait expectantly until the day the fragile vessel gives way to eternal splendor. And now, as we close, I invite you, if these reflections have spoken to your heart, do not keep them hidden. Like this message, share it, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe, that others too may discover the treasure hidden in their own earthen vessel. For the light of Christ longs to shine through every crack, until the world is filled with his glory. What we hold within this treasure is not a thing but a person. Christ himself dwells in us by his Spirit. That is the marvel. The infinite stoops to indwell the finite. The Creator chooses the created as his dwelling place. The heavens, vast and unmeasured, cannot contain him, and yet he makes his home in the fragile heart of a believer. What dignity this bestows upon our clay! It is no longer merely dust. It has become the temple of the Holy One. This, I think, is why Christian joy has a peculiar texture. It does not spring from circumstances, nor does it collapse when sorrow strikes. It rests upon the unshakable truth that the treasure is secure. The jar may tremble, but the contents are unassailable. That joy becomes, as it were, a song that plays faintly through the cracks, a melody of heaven carried upon the wind of time. Nor should we overlook gratitude. When we awaken each morning, we rise not empty, but already rich, for the treasure does not come and go with fortune. It abides. The Christian may lose possessions, reputation, even health, and yet still remain a bearer of immeasurable wealth. Gratitude, then, becomes not a response to ease, but a recognition of presence, the presence of Christ within, steady as the morning star. And what of love? Ah, here is the crown, for if the treasure is truly within us, then it must spill over. A vessel filled but never poured becomes stagnant, but when poured out in love, whether in words of kindness, acts of mercy, or prayers whispered for another, the treasure multiplies rather than diminishes. Love, after all, is the one treasure that grows richer by giving it away. At the last, when we have run our course and the jar is laid in the earth, the treasure will not be lost. Rather, it will shine forth in a splendor the vessel could never contain. The clay returns to dust, but the glory ascends. And in that great unveiling we shall see with our own eyes what we carried so long by faith. Christ in us, the hope of glory. So let us not despise the cracks, nor fear the breaking, nor cling too tightly to the clay, for our confidence is this: the potter who shaped us has placed his treasure within us, and he will, in his time, reveal it. That is the promise, and it is enough. And now, dear listener, if these words have stirred even a flicker of light in your heart, I invite you to join in this work of spreading that light. Like this message, leave your reflections in the comments, share it with others who may need encouragement, and subscribe that we may continue together in these meditations. For though we are but earthen vessels, the treasure we carry is eternal. The phrase treasure in earthen vessels teaches us not only about weakness and hope, but about purpose. A vessel without treasure is but an empty shell, however polished. But when filled, even the plainest jar assumes immeasurable value. So too with us. Our worth does not rest in skill or beauty or accomplishment, but in the presence of Christ within. Strip these away, and the treasure abides. Cling to them without him, and the vessel remains barren. This understanding frees us from envy. Why covet another's jar when each of us bears the same immortal treasure? Whether adorned or plain, large or small, all vessels alike are made sacred by what they hold. Thus, the eye of faith learns to look past the exterior and rejoice in the shared glory. It also frees us from fear. For fear thrives on the thought that fragility means futility, that weakness dooms us to failure. But here is the gospel's reply. Weakness is not the end, but the means. Not a barrier, but a channel. Through the crack, the light shines brighter. Through the breaking, the treasure is revealed. If we understood this fully, we might almost welcome the breaking, knowing what splendor it prepares. Consider, too, how this image leads us to worship. The wonder is not that clay jars exist, but that God has chosen them to carry his life. The wonder is not that we are fragile, but that he is willing to pour his glory into such fragility. What greater cause for adoration than this, that the eternal would stoop so low to lift us so high? Worship is, in the end, the vessel overflowing. And finally, let us think of heaven. What will it mean when the vessel is remade, incorruptible and glorious? The treasure will no longer be glimpsed through cracks, but will blaze unhindered. Yet even then we shall remember that once, for a little while, the glory dwelt in clay. And perhaps we shall see that those years of fragility were not wasted but sanctified. That every crack, every scar, every weakness born in faith prepared us for the splendor to come. So the image stands before us as both comfort and summons. Comfort, because we need not despise our weakness. Summons, because we must live as those entrusted with treasure. The world does not need to marvel at our clay. It needs to behold the light within. Therefore, let us carry this truth into every corner of our lives, into our homes, our work, our friendships, our trials, bearing witness not to the vessel but to the treasure. And may the day hasten when every jar, broken and remade, shines with the full radiance of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. And so, my dear friends, if these reflections have given you encouragement, I ask you to join me in this journey. Like this message, share it with those who walk in fragility. Leave your thoughts below and subscribe, that together we may continue to ponder the mystery of glory hidden in clay. For though we are earthen vessels, the treasure within us is eternal. As I draw these reflections to a close, I cannot help but return to that striking paradox, the immortal God dwelling in mortal clay. It is not a metaphor to be admired from afar, but a truth to be lived daily, with awe and trembling. For if Christ truly resides in us, then our lives are no longer trivial things, blown about by circumstance, but holy vessels chosen for eternal purposes. The world will always prefer the gleam of gold and the solidity of marble. It will always admire strength, polish, and perfection. But God, in His wisdom, has chosen jars of clay common, fragile, and unimpressive. Why? So that the surpassing greatness of the power may be seen as His and not ours. In the end, this is freedom, to know that the outcome does not rest upon our strength, nor does glory belong to us. We are free simply to be faithful vessels, however cracked, however ordinary, because the treasure is secure. This truth transforms how we see every moment. Our weaknesses, which once filled us with shame, can now be surrendered as places where His light shines through. Our sufferings, which seemed meaningless, can now be understood as chisels in the potter's hand, shaping us for glory. Even death itself loses its sting, for it is but the breaking of the vessel, the unveiling of the treasure. The clay returns to dust, but the glory ascends. And this same truth transforms how we see others. The colleague who irritates us, the neighbor we overlook, the stranger in Ragsall are vessels of clay, yet each may bear the hidden treasure of Christ. To dismiss them as ordinary is to miss the glory. The call, then, is to look with the eyes of faith, to treat every human being as one who may contain immortal beauty, hidden beneath fragile dust. We must also remember that a vessel is not designed to hoard, but to pour. The treasure within us is not given to remain locked away, but to spill over in love, mercy, and hope. When we forgive, when we comfort, when we bear with patience, we are pouring the treasure. And the miracle of this economy is that the more we pour, the more we are filled. The treasure does not diminish by being shared, it multiplies. So, my friends, let us not despair over our cracks, nor boast in our strength. Let us simply yield ourselves into the hands of the potter, trusting that He who filled us will also keep us. And let us live as bearers of the treasure fragile, yes, but radiant with the light of Christ. And now, if these words have touched you, if the light has stirred even faintly in your heart, I would ask you to join me in spreading it further. Like this message, leave your reflections in the comments. Share it with others who may need encouragement, and subscribe, that we may continue together in these meditations. For though we are but earthen vessels, the treasure we carry is eternal.